The Saucony Endorphin Series has been, without a doubt, one of the most iconic and fan-favorite running shoe lines over the past 3 or 4 years, hands down, without a doubt. They've been very successful, they've been reviewed very well, and people generally love the Endorphin Series. But as a runner, I've largely ignored them since about 2020. Now, that's going to change on this channel in 2024. I have purchased the Endorphin Speed 4 and the Endorphin Pro 4. My reviews will be coming on this channel after this video. But as I do on this channel, I want to get into a bit of the history of the Endorphin series, because even though it's a new series of shoes, it was started at a very interesting and pinnacle time for running shoes, as well as I want to touch on the future of the Endorphin series, which could be a little tricky over the next few years. And through that story, I'm going to get into what my principal beef with Saucony has been based on my experience with another running shoe line of theirs that goes much further back into 2010. Now, this story is going to start way back in 2010 with the original Saucony Kinvara 1. Now, this shoe was quite iconic for the time. So if you were involved in running back then, this was really the start of major manufacturers beginning to jump on the whole barefoot running thing. New Balance had the Minimus line, Merrell had the Road and Trail gloves, the Vivum 5 Fingers were just really starting to pick up speed here based on, their inclusion in the book Born to Run, which had come out a year before this. Vivo Barefoot was just starting out. Barefoot shoes were definitely becoming the thing, and all the major manufacturers were beginning to look at them and figure out, how can we incorporate barefoot running or minimalist running into our running lines? Now, Saucony looked at that, and I think they looked at probably the most iconic of the major manufacturers of the period, which was really the Nike Free series. Now, the Nike Free series started with this one back in 2004. But by 2010, there were many other Nike Frees. The Nike Frees were very iconic by 2010, and they were very good. They were very good lifestyle shoes that you could run in occasionally, but no one was training in them. No one was really putting in a lot of running miles in these. But this was not a barefoot shoe. Instead, this was a shoe that was meant to mimic the natural foot movement and allow your foot to move naturally like it was barefoot, but still giving you protection of a midsole. And it was an interesting idea. And I think this is the idea that a lot of the brands, major brands, latched onto, Saucony being one of them. But what Saucony did here was that they took that essential barefoot or minimalist flexible trainer and they made it a runner. The Kinvara 1 was a very good running shoe. It was probably the best of the minimalist runners of this period, and it was for multiple years after 2010. Saucony really took what Nike did with the natural flexing minimal trainer, and they really beefed it up, and they made it a very good running shoe. But this gets into sort of my first beef, I guess, with Saucony, is that they're the type of company that will take an idea and they will just drive it into the ground and milk it until there's nothing left. And by looking at this image, you can really see that. Now, the Kinvara 1 was a breath of fresh air. It was a great shoe. I had a pair. It was great. The Kinvara 2 was minor updates. The Kinvara 3 got a little bit more streamlined. The Kinvara 4 was probably, honestly, the last Kinvara that anyone paid attention to. And then after that, it was just milk it for all it's worth, drive it into the ground. Also remember, in 2013, Adidas released Boost. The running shoe world had changed away from the whole minimalist thing, which by 2013 was also sort of waning. No one was really interested in that anymore. And shoes just changed. And really for the next 5 years, no one paid attention to Saucony. And Saucony just kept making Kinvara. And obviously they were making other models at the time, but the Kinvara was really the one that people had been paying attention to prior. There's been a couple track spikes and there's been some racing flats that people love, but fundamentally the Kinvara is what put them on the map in the 2010s. And by 2013, no one was paying attention to them, and they just kept pumping out Kinvaras. In fact, in 2023, we got the Kinvara 14. In 2024, we're going to see the Kinvara 15. Kinvara is still around. But again, by 2013, things had really changed and people had really stopped paying attention to the Kinvara at all. In 2017, and I've talked a lot about this on the channel, Nike comes out with the Vaporfly 4%, which really fundamentally overnight changes running shoes altogether. The whole carbon-plated super shoe thing starts. And that starts in 2017. Now, 2017, 18, 19, even 2020 was a very interesting time for running shoes because that's where a lot of the manufacturers were just desperately trying to match anything Nike was doing. And this was very much the period of just put a plate in it. We saw some truly awful shoes. Now, by 2019, we started to see the rumblings from Saucony that there was going to be this new series called the Endorphin. They were showing off the Endorphin Pro at the running event in Austin, Texas that year. And the US Olympic Marathon trials were coming up in 2020. So a lot of the manufacturers were getting shoes together for 2020 to really try to compete against Nike. But in 2020, Nike releases the next percent, which is the next iteration on the 4%. They also come out with the Alphafly 1 in 2020. So by 2020, Nike was already on its second generation of the Vaporfly, and they had released a completely new shoe in the Alphafly. Yet all the other manufacturers were still giving us these kind of shoes that were just awful. They were horrible, horrible carbon-plated shoes. But by early 2020, we get this, the actual release of the Endorphin series. Now, as I said, Saucony was previewing the Endorphin Pro late 2019, and by the early 2020 of the US Olympic Marathon trials, the Endorphin Pro was on the feet of a lot of the Saucony athletes. In fact, I think it was probably the next most used carbon-plated shoe at those US Olympic Marathon trials, next to the Alphafly. Completely overshadowed by the Alphafly because this was the Alphafly event where Nike gave everyone who participated in it a pair of Alphaflys. But out of that, the Endorphin series was really launched. So by April, we got the consumer release of the Endorphin Pro, and then June, July, we got the Endorphin Shift and the Endorphin Speed. This really cemented the Endorphin series as kind of the must-have shoe of early 2020. And this was a huge surprise because, like I said, no one was paying attention to Saucony for the past 5 or 6 years, ever since really 2013. And out of nowhere, seemingly, we get this pretty amazing line of shoes that really wasn't quite at the level of the Vaporfly yet, but for general running and every other runner who didn't want the extremeness of the Vaporfly Next Percent, there was a lot here, and there's a lot of really good technology here. But this gets into sort of my second major beef with Saucony. It's that Saucony gets credit very often for being a very innovative company. They're really not, though. They're kind of the opposite of an innovative company. The model for the Endorphin line that launched in 2020 was set in 2017 by Nike with the Pegasus, the Zoomfly, the Vaporfly, and the Vaporfly Elite. The Endorphin series didn't launch with Elite, but now we have an Elite. Even though Saucony isn't the most innovative company, they are a company that can take someone else's innovation or idea and really refine it, really package it and rethink it to make it more usable for more runners. Because Saucony's whole thing is about democratizing innovation. Even back in 2020, they were saying that, using different words. And the Endorphin series really did set a benchmark for releasing super shoes that everyone could use. Now, the timeline of 2020 is really important here. The Endorphin Pro was previewed at the end of 2019. It showed up on the feet of Saucony racers at the US Olympic Marathon trials early in 2020. And by April, June-ish, the entire series was released to consumers. But we also got this shoe, the Adios Pro, in June of that year, though it got wider release in the fall. We got the Vaporfly Next Percent that came out in 2020 in April, so around the time that the Endorphin Pro was launching. And we got the Alphafly that was released early 2020 for some people, a limited drop. And then we got the full release in the fall of that year. So a lot of shoes that we're still talking about that are top tier super shoes really all saw their first versions in 2020. And that's an important thing to note. So now that I've aired my two major beefs with Saucony, let me give Saucony some props here because they did do something really quite special with the original Endorphin series. Now, while Saucony isn't the most innovative company, like I said, they're very good at understanding someone else's idea or innovation and then really taking their own spin to it, making it a very Saucony idea. And I think Saucony really understood something about the Vaporfly that no other manufacturer really understood. And even in 2024, seems like a few of these manufacturers still don't understand this. But the first thing that they really understood was that the foam is important. PIBA foam is important, but even more so, Pebax foam from Arkema is important. Now, PIBA and Pebax are the same foam, but think of Pebax as the brand name of PIBA, and PIBA is the generic name. Pebax by Arkema is the foam that is ZoomX essentially. The X in Zoom is Pebax. Now, Saucony had a relationship with Arkema through other foams, so they were smart. They went with Arkema's Pebax for Power Run PB, which was the new foam in the Endorphin series. But even more so than any other brand, Saucony also understood that the curve, the S-curve or the spoon, the geometry of the carbon fiber plate or the plate in the shoe is key. And I think Saucony understood this much better than any other brand, even until 2024. A lot of brands really don't get this point. Now, if we look at the curve of the Saucony Endorphin plate, and essentially the curve and geometry of the Speed and Pro plate has always been the same. It's just the Speed gets the nylon plate, the Pro plate gets the carbon fiber plate. And we match that to the Vaporfly plate, which is that classic high in the heel, dip in the midfoot, curve up in the toe. You can see that Saucony was essentially doing that. They were very smart. They didn't dip in the midfoot quite as much as the Nike plate did, but again, I've talked about this before, and I think Nike protects that quite a bit with patents, so no one else can actually have that. Saucony, I think, got as close to it as they possibly could, but they brought a different idea here. So if you look at the kind of center line or flat line of the plate coming from the flat part of the heel, if you look at the Nike plate, you see that starts high in the heel, dips in the midfoot, you get the spoon or the curve up into the toe, but the actual curve of the toe doesn't really come up much higher than the heel. In the Saucony plate, though, we get a very pronounced toe spring. The toe spring actually goes up quite a bit more than the flat part of the heel. They have a much less pronounced midfoot drop, but the plate comes close to the ground and the toe spring is quite extreme. That geometry is what Saucony has called their speed roll technology, and that's been very integral to the Endorphin line since the very beginning. And what that's actually doing is the Nike plate will give you that sort of response and pop and energy return from the midfoot curve and the toe spring curve or the toe rocker curve in an even way. Whereas with the Saucony plate, you get a little bit of that midfoot pop, especially in the Pro, but you get a lot of roll off that really exaggerated toe spring. And that's really kind of the specialness of the speed roll technology that Saucony's had since day one. Additionally, I think Saucony also understood another thing, that the interplay between the plate and the foam is also very integral. That's very important. The flex of the plate and the way it works with the foam is very important. It's not just the foam, it's not just the plate. They have to work in conjunction, which is something the Vaporfly has always done. And I think the fact that they did the Speed with the nylon plate, which allowed a very flexible plate, and they did the Pro with the stiffer carbon fiber plate, showed that they also really understood this and how their plate will work with the Power Run PB foam. Now, back in 2020, I did actually purchase a pair of Endorphin Speeds, and I put about 40 miles in them, and I hated them. I really, really hated them. Now, at the time, the only other PIBA or Pebax foam I had run in, or really anyone had run in, was ZoomX. So I think at the time I was expecting that ZoomX sink, the softness, the bounciness, the yoga ball sort of sink in, and then that really great energy return and pop out from the foam. And I didn't get that at all in the Power Run PB. Additionally, I did not like the way the shoe fit. It just fit really sloppy on my foot. I hated the heel of the Endorphin Speed. That big piece of plastic they had back there was just awful. And overall, the shoe just felt really cheap. It fit and felt cheap on the foot. And Power and PB has an off-gassing smell to it that is very distinct. And it's still here in 2024. But back then, I just felt like it was a very cheap shoe that fit very poorly and did not run the way I expected it to. So I, after 40 miles, put it in the donation bin and it went off to Goodwill in Brooklyn, New York. Now in 2021, Saucony comes back with an update to the Endorphin series. So we get the Endorphin Speed 2, the Endorphin Pro 2, and the Endorphin Shift 2. Now I haven't talked about the Shift yet, but the Shift was meant to be their kind of all-around trainer within the line. Didn't have a plate in it, didn't have the same Power Run PB foam, it had just an EVA Power Run foam in it. It was the shoe that was meant to be the all-arounder to the two plated shoes above it. But with the Series 2 of the Endorphins, Saucony didn't change much. There was some upper refinements, specifically on the Speed 2. They got rid of that awful plastic thing on the heel. But essentially, it was just really an upper change. Same midsole, same plate, same outsole, essentially, some recolors. Now, this checkerboard colorway, I think, is probably one of the most iconic Endorphin colorways besides the Mutant colorway that I think everyone remembers. And this shoe was everywhere in 2021, and it was still quite popular. Again, Saucony hadn't really changed much since the first version. And this is Saucony, again, being Saucony. And I think I also began to see this is that, okay, it looks like they're just going to repeat what they did with the Kinvara, and they're just going to lean in and sort of slowly iterate on the Endorphin series and really just drive it into the ground over time. So that's the other reason I sort of just stopped paying attention to the Endorphin series, is because I just didn't want to get sucked into a series and then have it end the way the Kinvara did for me. But in late 2021, we got something that I actually found a little bit shocking and quite interesting in the Endorphin series, and that was the Endorphin Pro Plus. Now, this was essentially the exact same midsole, same plate, same outsole as the Endorphin Pro and Pro 2, but it had a new lightweight upper. It was a upper heavily inspired from their Endorphin Track Spike series, and it really lightened this shoe up. It really made this shoe kind of a true top tier super shoe of 2021. It didn't get a wide release. There weren't a lot of these made. This was meant to be sort of an exclusive thing. But this was interesting because I did not expect this. This was a little bit of a new direction for the Endorphin Pro. And you could see that Saucony was beginning to think about how can they differentiate and push the Pro a little bit beyond what the Endorphin Speed was. I paid attention to this shoe. And to this day, I think this is probably one of the best looking Sauconys I've ever seen. Saucony's aesthetics are not always the best. I didn't particularly like the checker flag colorway from the Series 2. I really didn't like the Endorphin, the original Endorphin colorways either. But this is a beautiful shoe. And there were a couple other colorways in the Pro, and I think they're all very beautiful shoes. But this was interesting because it set the Pro up to be something a little bit different than the Speed, which I think the Pro needed. And in 2022, we finally got the update to the Endorphin series with the Series 3. So we got the Speed 3, the Pro 3, and the Shift 3. Now this was the biggest update to date. This overall made the Endorphin series a much more comfortable, softer, more forgiving series. Now the original Speed and Pro and the Speed 2 and Pro 2 had a reputation for being fun, but a little aggressive. They could be a little unstable. They could be a little much to handle for some runners. And I think with the Series 3, Saucony was really trying to make these just more broader, make these work for more people. So the Speed 3 got the stability wings in the plate, so the medial and lateral wing, this is where we first see it. And overall, the Speed got a softer power run PB, and the Speed 3 really set the template for what the Super Trainer became. The plated shoe that used the plate for stability, that you could really kind of do everything in because it was soft enough to do easy running, it was flexible enough to do that sort of easy recovery running, but it was also structured enough with the plate where you could do the faster tempo work in the shoe as well. The Endorphin Pro got the lighter weight upper, but it also got a whole bunch of other overlays and coloring and all sorts of other stuff on it, and overall The Pro 3 got a little bit wider, got a little bit softer, and it became the super shoe or carbon plated racer that was, really for everybody. If you found one of the top tier Nike, Adidas, or Asics super shoes to be too aggressive, too much to handle, you could go to the Pro 3 and it would feel very familiar and it would work very well. And the Shift got a somewhat minor update as well, where it became just sort of the trainer. But by then, the Shift was already being eclipsed by some other shoes that Saucony was working on, and some other models were evolving more in the direction of the Shift. So the Shift was sort of on borrowed time at this point. But I think a lot of people loved the Speed 3 and the Pro 3. And these shoes were, I think, even more popular in hindsight, looking back on it, than the first two generations, because these really did make these the all-around trainer and racer for everyone. And speaking of 2023, we didn't get an Endorphin update. Instead, we got the Endorphin Elite in February, early spring of 2023. And then by summer, we got the Kinvara Pro. Now, this is an interesting point of divergence for the Endorphin line. The Endorphin Elite is a new model to the Endorphin line. The Kinvara Pro is not an Endorphin, but it does sort of compete with the Endorphins. Now, the Endorphin Elite marked a new entry into the Endorphin series, and it was a few pieces of new tech for Saucony as well in the Endorphin line. It was a new foam, Power & HG, which is a non-beaded supercritical PBEX foam, still from Arkema. Now, in the original Endorphins, first three generations, Power and PB was a beaded PBEX foam, and Saucony went with that for durability. In the Endorphin Elite with Power and HG, they went to maximize energy return, because the Elite has a completely new plate geometry. It has the high plate configuration, very similar to what Nike does in the Alphafly. So this is putting a lot more resiliency into the Power and HG foam, putting a plate closer to the foot, which then you're loading up and really using the explosive energy return of the foam to really propel you forward. So this is really Saucony looking at the Alphafly, and to be fair, a little bit of the Adidas Adios Pro 3 as well, with that forked plate and the overall geometry of this shoe, in taking really the best of the Alphafly and the Adios Pro 3 and making a shoe that had the plate configuration of Alphafly, but the sort of roll off the toe of the Adios Pro 3. And in 2023, in the summer, we got this shoe, the Kinvara Pro, which is really just sort of an abomination of a shoe. It is one of the worst concepted and developed running shoes in really the past 10 years. This is a shoe that really no one liked. Yes, I know there's probably in the comments I'm going to see some people loved running this shoe, but generally this shoe was very poorly received. Generally, it was very negatively reviewed, or if it was positively reviewed, people were now very confused as to where this sits in relation to the Endorphin Speed 3. How does this shoe now differ? So this idea of trying to make a plated daily trainer for everyone that could also be a racer for, people running a 4 or 5 hour plus marathon. On paper, I think there's something interesting there, but other brands have done shoes that do this much better. This shoe just was horrible across the board. And I think this actually speaks to Saucony as an innovation company. When Saucony is innovating on their own, you get things like this. When Saucony is refining someone else's innovations, you get things like the Endorphin Elite, which, again, has its fans, isn't the best shoe out there, but it definitely has its fans. So in 2023, we got these two shoes, which complicate the future of the Endorphin series. And that brings us to 2024, where we get the Endorphin Speed 4 and the Endorphin Pro 4. Now, I've purchased both of these shoes. I'm going to be doing a lot of content on these shoes, reviews, comparisons, all that's coming next on the channel. But these two shoes, I think, brought a bunch of changes to them. I think they brought the Endorphin series back to the feel of the original and Series 2, but they kept some of the comfort and stability that Saucony brought into the Endorphin Series 3. And they're kind of a mix of the two. I've been actually enjoying both of these shoes. I'm going to be honest. I'm actually enjoying running in both of them. And I'm glad I started here because when I bought these two shoes, I actually put on the Endorphin Pro 3, and I'm glad I didn't try the Endorphin Pro 3 series because that shoe was too soft, too mushy. There's absolutely no way I would have enjoyed running that shoe, and I never would have looked at the Endorphin series again if I had started there. I'm glad I came back to the Endorphin series in the 4 because I think both of these are very interesting shoes. However, Saucony's performance running line, the tip of the spear of their performance running, is very messy right now. Because we have the Speed 4 and the Pro 4, which everyone understands the relationship there. You have the Tempo or the All-Arounder, then you have the Racer. But now we have the Kinvara Pro and the Endorphin Elite. The Kinvara Pro really isn't the trainer to the Endorphin Elite, but on paper they kind of look like they are. Geometry-wise, they kind of look like they are. But more importantly, and I think this is what speaks to maybe the dicey future of the Endorphin series, is that Saucony spent a lot of money developing the Kinvara Pro and the Endorphin Elite. Now, the Endorphin Elite I think has done okay, but the Pro I just don't think has done really well, and it's definitely not done what I think Saucony wanted to do. And this is important because the parent company or the holding company for Saucony is a company called Wolverine Worldwide. So if you're familiar with Wolverine boots, this is the same company. Now, Wolverine is a company that's bought a lot of footwear brands over the years. They're not opposed to killing off the brand if it's not profitable enough for them. Now, if you look at the portfolio of companies that Wolverine has, and this is a screenshot from their website, look at those brands down the side. All of those brands are kind of all over the place as far as what category of footwear they're in. But besides Saucony and maybe Merrell, but that's a little bit dicey too, there's not really any performance running lines there. You could say that Merrell is good with mountain shoes, hiking shoes, maybe trail running. I know they're trying to come back in 2024, but they're not quite at the same level. But every other brand in there is sort of all over the place. You have a mix of workwear, boots, legacy brands. You just have a mix of a bunch of stuff. There are a lot of discount brands in there. You just have a mix of a lot of things. So this move of closing down the Boston offices and moving all of the brands to their Michigan headquarters will affect Saucony. Now, the reason for doing this that Wolverine is saying is that they want to put all of their brands under one roof so they can share innovation and, cross-pollinate and do all those sort of things. I've been through enough sort of acquisitions in the corporate world that it never works that way. There's always some underlying motive. It's a cost-cutting thing for Wolverine. They just want to get everything under one roof. And I don't necessarily think that this bodes well for Saucony because you look at all the other brands in there, and the only other two brands, as I said, that would maybe fit with Saucony would be Merrell and then Sweaty Betty. So I could see a lot of pressure on Saucony to become more of a lifestyle brand, a little bit less of a performance running brand, focus more on things that they could package with Merrell for maybe, hiking or trail type stuff and sell via Sweaty Betty. Again, none of that bodes well for Saucony. So I think the next few years are going to be a little dicey for both Saucony and the Endorphin lineup. I think there might be pressure on them to streamline and cost cut in the Endorphin series and just sort of make all of their running line a little bit more lifestyle oriented, which are definitely not what the Endorphins are. On the flip side of that, I could see Saucony maybe being able to secure budget for the performance running and put that towards the Endorphin line. But now that they have the Kinvara Pro line and the Endorphin Elite line, that's a very expensive lineup. There's a lot of expensive materials and processes in there. I don't think they can sustain all of these shoes, let alone the other models that they have in the Ride and the Triumph and all their other models that they make. It's going to be a little interesting where they go. I hope they don't stick to the Endorphin and drive it into the ground like they did with the Kinvara all those years ago. I hope they find a way to make these continue to evolve because I think the Generation 4 of the Endorphin has been really, really good, and I think it's been really well needed. It brought me back to the Endorphins, and like I said earlier in the video, I have been enjoying running in them. More on that in my reviews of these shoes. But I hope Saucony can figure out a path forward with their holding company of Wolverine Worldwide and figure out a way to make their performance shoes continue down the path that they've been. So there you go. I do think the next couple years are going to be very telling, and they could be a little dicey for Saucony and the Endorphin series. I hope they figure out a path forward with them in all of their performance running line, and I hope they don't get the cost-cutting measures too hardcore applied to them. We will see. As I said multiple times in this video, I am moving forward with Saucony. I am covering the Endorphin series now. I'm enjoying the Speed 4 and the Pro 4. I'll have videos on those both. And moving forward, as long as the Endorphin series is around, I will be paying attention to them on this channel. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this kind of content enjoyable and useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.